to go ahead and turn things over to our presenters to kick off our presentation directly to Jeremy Koerber. But stay tuned. Here we go for a spectacular presentation again. Thanks.
5.8 million people are estimated to be living with some form of dementia right now. And there's approximately 11 million unpaid caregivers. If we were to kind of extrapolate that out, that would end up costing, if we were taking care of these individuals and doing the math, about $250 billion on an annual basis. That's what's estimated this year. So it's an issue. It was also an issue for my family. We went through this exact same thing with my grandmother in the early 2000s. So what we want to do here today is to talk a little bit about the 10 warning signs of Alzheimer's. Now, mind you, these are warning signs. And what I'm going to do in our brief time here today is to talk a little bit about what we would consider to be a red flag, something to be concerned about, and then something that would just be the normal part of the aging process. All right, so for our time today, we're going to talk a little bit about age-related memory, thinking, or behavior changes. And like I said, really try to recognize potential warning signs of a various type of dementia. We're going to explain some importances between why early detection and the benefits of a diagnosis. And then quickly, I'm going to go through some various resources that you can utilize today that are 100% free of charge. So first and foremost, what is Alzheimer's and dementia? That is a topic that is really interchangeable. People say, well, my mother had Alzheimer's or my grandfather had dementia. Understand this, all Alzheimer's is dementia, but not all dementia is Alzheimer's. So if you want to break it down into buckets, Alzheimer's makes up about 60 to 75% of all dementia cases. Coming in next would be vascular dementia. So when a person has a stroke and there's a lack of blood flow to the brain, it can start to accelerate a dementia type effect. There's dementia with Lewy bodies, there's frontotemporal. Parkinson's disease has a dementia-like effect. So it's not just this or that. It's like an umbrella of symptoms. So what we want to understand as we start to break down these warning signs, as I said a moment ago, if I say something here today and you're like, oh my gosh, that describes me. No. We all have issues when it comes to forgetting things. We all misplace our keys. As I will kind of allude to along the way here, the difference maker is for most people, if you lose your keys, and it may not be an instantaneous thing, but you can start to walk backwards and figure out, okay, I was in the car, I came in the house, I put them here, and ultimately you find those. An example of a head scratcher might be you're thirsty, you come in, you open up your freezer to make a glass of tea, you reach into the ice maker, my dog wants out, sit. You reach into the ice maker and out comes your keys. That's a potential problem. It's peculiar because keys don't typically live where your ice falls out of your freezer. So that's how we'll break this down. So first and foremost, number one sign is going to be memory loss that disrupts daily life. So a good example of that is forgetting recently learned information. Now, again, we all do that, but the key maker is that it's affecting life on a daily basis. Let's put that into that caveat. Number two is challenges in planning or solving problems. So a good example of this is if you are the person who does the monthly bills and you're consistent with it. An issue may be where now it's a little harder to balance the checkbook, or maybe you're forgetting to pay the electric bill, but you get a statement from your phone bill that says you have a $400 or $500 credit to it. You paid it multiple times. Head scratcher, that's a potential warning sign. We all forget to pay a bill from time to time. That happens. I think the key is that when you start to see some oddities in this, in yourself or someone else. Number three, difficulty completing familiar tasks. We see this when an individual has been driving to the same location over and over forever, and all of a sudden they can't quite remember how to do that. Or you put together a grocery list every single week and now you struggle with this. Those are things right there that could be a potential red flag. Confusion with time or place. This was one that really jumped out to us with my grandmother. We found her one day, and this kind of puts together several of these clues, but we found her one day in a parking lot. It was a Sunday afternoon, waiting for a meeting to start in this building. And the problem with that is, number one, it was Sunday afternoon, and the meeting had been 2 weeks prior to that. Now, we all miss an appointment every now and then. We all confuse a few things, but typically we're not talking about weeks, days, maybe months, odd times, or in this case, she sat in the parking lot for several hours waiting for people to arrive. So again, big red flag that came off. Next, number 5, trouble understanding visual images and spatial relationship. Now, this one right here is one that when a person has an impeccable driving record, now we're not talking about speeding tickets or things like that, but we're talking about we've never had an accident or a fender bender. And all of a sudden we're seeing, well, we backed into a car at the drugstore, or maybe we ran a red light and clipped somebody's bumper. The problem lies in the fact that a person with dementia is not processing things in the same way that they would if they didn't have that disease. And so space, color, images is all perceived by the brain differently. We go to a stoplight, we see green, yellow, red. They may not. Or if it goes from green to yellow or yellow to red, they may not process it quick enough to say, uh-oh, better slow down and stop. And that's where you can start to piece together puzzles. Number 6 would be new problems with words and speaking or writing. Now I probably have done it already today, where I will pause and I will think about the word or phrase that I want to give. The problem is going to lie into when they start calling things something other than what it is. So you've got your watch on your hand, and hey Bill, what time is it? And he's looking down like, well, my hand clock says it's this. Okay, well, that's curious. It's a hand clock. Or hey, can I, your pocket knife's laying on the table. Hey John, can I borrow that? What you mean, this pocket cutter? Something like that. They're having trouble and they're renaming things along the way. That should give you a little bit of a pause and say, I wonder what we should do there. All right, number 7, misplacing things and losing the ability to retrace those steps. We talked a moment in my first example about finding keys or finding things in odd places. That's a big one. Decreased or poor judgment. Number 8 would be something to the effect of, you go to a restaurant and tip is 20%, and all of a sudden they put down 100%. Or what I see a lot happen with, I'm from Jackson, Missouri, just so you kind of know where I'm from. And family members in the past, running chainsaws, running tractors, equipment, and all of a sudden they're making really bad choices in terms of not utilizing safety equipment or forgetting to use safety equipment. Those were always things that jumped out at us that, like, okay, we might have an issue here. Are they just getting in a hurry and not doing things the way they're supposed to for safety, or are they forgetting to do that and showing poor judgment? It's not a diagnosis, it's a question. And then 2 to go. Number 9, withdrawal from work or social activities. There's a reason for that. And it's not because they're tired or lazy or just don't want to do it anymore. Most people will start to withdraw because they can't keep up with conversation. So if you notice, Bill was always at the coffee shop at 7 a.m. 5 days a week to catch up with everyone before they went out for the day. And all of a sudden, Bill isn't there anymore. Bill's fine. He's healthy. There's nothing wrong with it, but he's not coming and engaging in that same conversation. The reason for it is because when he's sitting there at the table with everybody, he can't keep up with the conversation. He can hear it, he can't process it. Or maybe you're playing cards, games, things like that, things they love to do and know, and they're not doing it anymore. That's a sign. And then finally, number 10 is changes in mood and personality. All right. So this was something that we saw in my grandmother. Grandma, love her to death, but she could be a bit difficult and sometimes wouldn't go with the flow. When her personality did a complete 180, and all of a sudden, and again, and I'm not exaggerating, it was as if Snow White stepped off the movie screen and into our lives. It was awesome, but it's like, okay, I'm almost 40 years old and I've never seen grandma act or behave this way before. Likewise, on the flip side, if you have someone that's always been very easy to go along with everything, and all of a sudden, they're jumping out at you, or they're barking, or they're cranky, doesn't mean they're not having a bad day or they're tired or whatnot. But when you see changes in personality or mood change, and it's a complete 180 and it's not going back after they have a nap or maybe a snack, that's something to keep into consideration. So as we jump into this stuff, what we want to do is, the information I'm giving you today is not a diagnosis. It's a conversation starter. And that's what I want to get at right here. If you're feeling it in yourself, all right, have a conversation with a loved one. Have a conversation with someone you trust, a physician. That's important, because what we want to be able to do is to get ahead of this for a lot of reasons. With this group, I understand, that there's a wide array of family dynamics here. So it's important to have conversations with your care partners, your significant others, your spouses, family members, etc., because a lot is riding on you. So what can you do? Again, you're going to be seeing us more and more in the Bootheel. That's a fact. But in the interim, we do have virtual programs available. And if you go to what's called, let me get down here, communityresourcefinder.org. You can plug in your zip code and you can find a wide array of programs, both in person and virtual, available to you. And that's not just education, but also support groups like this. We have a really awesome support group that's ran through Aging Matters that covers the Bootheel, and it's virtual. So if that's, I know we're in a support group here, but if that was something that you were interested in, we can connect you with that. Other things that are on here, care at home, community services, housing options, medical services. It's a resource finder. So if you're looking for help in that category, we can help you there. Or if you just have a question, a concern, we do have a 24/7 helpline at 800-272-3900. I'll repeat, that one more time, 800-272-3900. It's there 24/7, 100% free. And it's there if you have a question, a concern. If you are a caregiver for someone with dementia and they're having a rough night at 2:00 in the morning, you can call and get help with tactics and strategies to deal with whatever's going on at that moment. Any questions that I can answer for you, or any feedback? Well, first off, bless you for calling me young man. I appreciate that. Secondly, I think you're doing the right things. Okay, so B12, yeah. I mean, and that's one of the things that I want to reiterate. If people are having symptoms like this, sometimes it's not dementia. In your case, it looks like it was low B12. So dementia is scary, but you know what? There's a lot of scary things out there. People are going to go up to Cape Girardeau today and get a diagnosis that says, hey, you've got this time frame right here. What we want to do is we want to get ahead of this. And the only other thing I would say, keep going to that doctor, keep taking the B12, keep asking hard questions, exercise, work on your nutrition, socialization, play brain games. So thank you. Thank you much. Any other questions here or comments? That was great. Okay, well, I think I've taken my time. I will put my email in the chat, and if anybody wants to connect with me, one-on-one, feel free to do that as well. I appreciate everybody's time here today. and I'm still hanging on. Okay, so let me help you out real quick here. And this might be my favorite statement that I make when we're talking about someone from a caregiving perspective, because the concept of if they're seeing snakes, with our understanding and responding to dementia-related behavior talk, we really look at a couple of different things when we're looking at assessing why a person does or says or sees. Now, if they're seeing something, that hallucination side of things, it absolutely happens. And I think the biggest key with that is we have a concept called joining their reality. So once you've assessed that they're safe, okay, there's nothing in the immediate area, there isn't truly a snake that's on that floor, that's number one. Number two, trying to connect with them and get a better understanding of what's going on, you know, emotionally. Hey, Mrs. Jones, I'm right here, you know, are you okay? Third thing is, sometimes you have to join that reality and go along with them. So if they see, I had someone one time that swore up and down on a daily basis there was a purple bunny that hopped through her kitchen. And what I told the caregiver was this: is that hurting you with that purple bunny? And she said no. And I said, then go along with it. Because if they're seeing a purple bunny, they're seeing a purple bunny. You can argue with them until the day is done, and it's not going to make a difference. It's not a safety issue. If it's not an issue to where, you know, they're completely frightened along the way. Now, if they're frightened, that's a different strategy, of course. But sometimes we have to join the reality, suspend what we know to be true, and go along with that. All right. Ask them questions. All right. What kind of snake is it? Is it one of those big fuzzy ones that you see at the carnival that you can, you know, you throw a dart and you win, or what is it? And let them kind of walk you through that, because you may be able to diffuse what's going on just by asking those questions. So it sounds kind of silly, and it may sound like you're talking to a kid, or maybe you're talking down to them, but you're not, because you are seeing, you're not seeing, but you're joining their reality. And that's how I would go with that. Now, what strategy you use after that, that's where thinking quick on your feet is important, you know, along that way. But that's how I would go. You know, why they're seeing snakes, I can't explain why it's a snake and not a unicorn. I don't know. But at the end of the day, it's always a white snake with stripes. Okay, got it. Well, I am here. I'm just going to be listening to this next presenter. So feel free to reach out to me directly, or throw something else in the chat, and I'll see what I can do for you. Well, you're stepping into my wheelhouse here, because I've been a personal trainer and coach for 25 years. So now you're speaking my language. Here's what I want you to do. I've got a good friend of mine from San Antonio, Texas, who says this: if it ran around or grew in the ground, eat it. And I'll go so far as to say, if it swam. And so what I mean by that is, if we get into the processed foods, you know, the stuff that comes in a box, you know, you walk into the grocery store, the stuff that comes in a box, that's processed. We make nutrition a whole lot harder sometimes than what it needs to be. So not knowing what's available where you live, I've never walked through your grocery store, I don't know what you like to eat. But if you can focus on things that are less processed and more, when we use the phrase whole food. So, you know, apples, there's no ingredient label on an apple. It just is what it is. You know, your lean meats. We do find that in a lot of our research, when you've heard the phrase the Mediterranean diet, anyone that's gone to a cardiologist, you've heard that before. It seems that what's good for the brain and the heart are the same. And actually, what you can do to improve diabetes management, reduce risk for cardiovascular disease, is the same type of eating that you would do for reducing risk of dementia. So my suggestion would be, you know, you could Google Mediterranean diet. I don't know if there's some resources that my colleagues from MU Extension on here could help you out with that are more local along those ways, or some of the other through the Nevada County Resource Center. I know they've got some information down there as well, but my email is in there. If you get stuck, you can always contact me directly. Nutrition can be easy, but it's not like we can sit here and say, eat this, do that, eat this, do that. It's more of a global approach. But again, if you want to make it super simple, if it ran around, it swam, or it grew in the ground, those are good choices to start with.
All right, do we have any other questions for our speaker today?
All right, I do see a question in here, and it was directly, so I won't name a name here, but it says, my father was recently diagnosed with Parkinson's. Do I need to be concerned with developing this in the future? And I think, okay, so I think the question is, if I'm reading it correctly, do I need to be concerned with developing this in the future? That is a great question. So I'm going to talk about this kind of in two buckets. There is, from an Alzheimer's and dementia perspective, there is what's called a risk gene, and there's called a deterministic gene. So one thing as a coach that I've learned over the course of years is I've heard this phrase almost daily. Well, my father or my mother had a heart attack at 62, so I guess I'm going to have one too. Not necessarily. All right. Same thing with diabetes, same thing with cancers. Our lifestyle and how we live and what we do is really important in terms of how we end up with what we have. Now, my grandfather's brothers, one died at 42, one died at 54, another died, I want to say, late 60s, all of cardiovascular related diseases. Grandpa will be 87 in May. Well, Grandpa's controlled his blood pressure. Grandpa has controlled his diabetes. Grandpa goes to the doctor. You see where I'm going here? So if you make bad choices, you smoke, you eat high-fat food, you don't exercise, yeah, if you have that risk gene, it is going to potentially cause a problem. Could Grandpa have a heart attack? Absolutely. But my point is this, and I'm going to use the same example with this question. I can't say here today that you would or wouldn't develop this state down the line. But if you would have developed it at 65, maybe by making better choices, you don't get it till 80. All right. And that's kind of how we look at those things right there. I actually just did some continuing education that was looking at not prevention of Parkinson's, but management of Parkinson's with exercise and really how it impacts the overall progression of this thing. Now, a deterministic gene, that's like, you've heard of that breast cancer gene where people can get tested for it and it will say, yep, that's a different animal when it comes to dementia. And that's typically when you see people who are diagnosed like in their 40s and 50s with it. It's called early onset. Truthfully, there's only about 200,000 people worldwide that have that. It's very, very rare. So I'll go back and say to the person that answered this question, I can't say that you would or you wouldn't, but what I would do is I would definitely learn as much about the disease as you can. If it's saying, hey, here are some things that you can do proactively to maybe prevent, reduce risk, or push it out farther, those are the things that I would be doing today. As soon as this call is over, you get off this, you go to Google and you start asking those questions right there. And I think what you'll find is a little bit more detailed answer to your question specifically with Parkinson's, but everything that I've talked about right here today will ring true with almost every disease state that's out there, whether it be diabetes or heart disease or stroke. You can get ahead of it and potentially reduce that risk by making better choices today. I hope I answered that question correctly. All right, anything else here? Let's see, I have another method. My father recently diagnosed. Oh, here's another one down here. How do you make sure I'm getting this in the right here? What is the youngest age to where? Okay, so that we've seen it as young as in their early 40s. And again, that is the early onset dementia, and it's very, very rare. How do I convince them to eat when they already think they have eaten? Boy, that's a great one. That's a really good one right there. Now it's not as exciting as a live version like this, but on our website we have like downloadable PDF, not PDFs, but PowerPoints that you can watch, or we actually have some of these on demand that you can register and watch for, download at your convenience. But now we have to go back to that concept of joining their reality and having some specific questions. It may also be what I call the sleight of hand. If you, well, you can't see me right now, I'm using my hands here. Let me get my, it's what I call the sleight of hand, okay? Meaning that, hey, I've already eaten. Okay, Mr. Jones, you've already eaten, you know. Hey, let's do this. Let's go color, paint, read a book, watch a show, okay? And in 10 minutes, you can come back around and say, hey, Mr. Jones, it's lunchtime. It is. And you go right in there. Now, I'm not going to promise you that that is going to be, it works every time. But if you use that process that we talked about, physical connection, what's going on, emotional connection, strategy, you may start to piece together some clues as to why he feels he's already eaten. And then with that sleight of hand and a little bit of redirection, you can loop back around. And sometimes it's a situation. We have a case study quickly where this family was having an awful time of getting, first off, their mother to eat, and secondly, she wouldn't stay in bed at night. And when you start to peel the onions back, the layers, the case study goes where their mother was a night nurse for 40 years. So at like midnight, she was up wanting to walk up and down the hallways because that's what she did. And so what they did was she wouldn't sit down to eat, but then they put out like finger foods on the countertop. So when she would walk by, she'd grab a handful of nuts or she'd grab this. And that's how they got her to eat, is they had to go back and they had to think, hey, what did mom do? So if this particular gentleman or lady, whoever, you know, think back to what they did. Were they a nurse? Did they work in healthcare? Were they a farmer? You know, what were they doing and how did they do? Because it could very well be, you know, if you're trying to get them to have lunch at 11, maybe this gentleman came in from the fields at 1 o'clock every day, and maybe all you have to do is join the reality, play a little game, and say, hey, Mr. Jones, before you go back out to the field, don't you think it's time for a sandwich? I've got ham or chicken. What would you like? And there you go. All right. Let's see. What do we got here? Oh, good. Good. Someone said they're having an issue right now and they were looking for, they have a doctor's appointment today. I love that. You know, don't fear it, get ahead of it. Should our healthcare system focus on prevention or management? Should our healthcare system focus on prevention or management or some of both? Now you're going to put me up on a soapbox here, because prevention, unfortunately, isn't, it doesn't make a lot of money. Okay. So, you know, and that's not me, you know, throwing stones, but that's just the reality. I mean, I worked for BJC Healthcare for 18 years and I saw where wellness and health prevention was over surgeries and orthopedic and stuff like that. I mean, it is what it is. It needs to be. And if you are being proactive, and I can only appreciate and respect what everybody on this call is doing right now, because, you know, it sounds like from a family dynamics perspective, you got your hands full. So regardless of what your, and this is hard, by the way, this is not me saying, well, just go do this. It's more along the lines of when I talk to people and they say, wow, I'm working 80 hours a week, or wow, I'm doing this. In your case, you know, you're helping to raise children and grandchildren here. We have to be able to carve out something for yourself. And if that is, you know, a healthy snack or a walk, or, you know, making sure you're getting to the doctor to the best of your ability for your age appropriate, gender appropriate, however you want to say it, physicals, that's important stuff. So my thing with you specifically, because you were so, you know, open and honest about the B12 deficiency, keep doing that. Keep asking questions, keep going to resources that are going to help you stay healthier and stronger longer. Does that make sense? Awesome. My question was, how do you get help for someone who does? Oh boy. Okay. I'm sorry, I misunderstood that. The father has the appointment, but it sounds, I'm going to paraphrase here, that they don't think they have a memory issue. Okay. Whew, tough. So here's what I'm going to suggest you do. I would highly encourage you to call that 800 number, because there are individuals there that are way smarter than me that can help walk you through that process from a tactical standpoint. We also have an education. We actually have an online one coming up on October 6th, virtual, called Dementia Conversations. And that is doctor's visits, driving, and legal and financial planning concepts, the taboo things that nobody wants to have a conversation about, because it's really weird when you start to change roles in the family dynamic. I would highly encourage you to start with that helpline. And if you think that education could be important for you, hop on and watch that, because it's not just as easy as saying, well, Dad, they're in denial. We have situations where spouses, one is in denial of what's going on. And it's a real thing. So it's not an easy answer, but it's an answer that I think if you start to arm yourself, call the helpline, watch that education. I would ask the question, you don't need to answer, it's hypothetical. Who else is around you? Because at some point, if you have siblings or friends or clergy or church family that can have this conversation with you, sometimes it's tricky. That's why I want you to call the helpline first. It's almost an intervention style type conversation. And it may be a conversation that you have to have more than one time and try different tactics to, because my guess is it probably won't be received super well in the beginning. So this is not something that you sit down and say, gosh, Dad, I'm seeing, you need to think through how you would do this. And that's why I encourage you. The folks on the helpline, they're master's level clinicians. I've got a degree in health promotion from Southeast Missouri State. So they are smarter than me when it comes to that. So 800-272-3900. Please give them a call. Any other questions? Awesome. Well, I represent the association. We greatly appreciate the opportunity. The pandemic threw a massive wrench. We were down. Pre-pandemic, we were in places like Hayti and Sykeston and Charleston, and you all know Mary Ingram. She's one of our educators. You've seen her before on here. And so we've got a few warriors in the area, and we're looking to come out, recruit more help, and be more of a presence down there, because I may be in St. Louis, but I'm from Cape. I have a soft spot in my heart for the Bootheel, and I want to make sure you guys got help. So thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Jeremy, for that really informative and excellent presentation today. We so appreciate your time and all of the work that went into preparing this for us and answering all those questions for us. So thank you so much. And please know you are welcome to come back anytime you'd like. We'd love to have you again.